Now, some of the proteins that are made, okay, cells made hundreds of proteins. Some of them are enzymes that the cell will use. Some of those proteins are going to be placed in the ribosome, in the lysosomes, in different cell organelles. Some proteins go to the nucleus to work there, some to the mitochondria. Some of the proteins are going to be exported, okay, for example, insulin or glucagon, growth hormone, those are exported. And some proteins will form part of the cell membrane. The cell membrane, as we mentioned in the past lecture, is what separates the intracellular from the extracellular environment. Okay, if you remember in physiology, we consider it's like the body has only one cell when we analyze the composition of the body fluids. The cell membrane has a very interesting structure. Okay, it's made of a double layer of phospholipids. Also has some proteins and some carbohydrates, plus some cholesterol in between those layers, okay, or embedded within the phospholipids. Okay, this phospholipid bilayer is what allows the cells to be almost impermeable to everything and allows the cells to be very selective or act as a selective barrier that controls very tightly what goes out or comes into the cells. Okay, here we have an explanation about the phospholipids. Okay, in the following slides we have more details if you want to understand this better. Okay, but basically the phospholipids have a head that is hydrophilic, okay, that is in contact with the water outside the cell or the water in the cytoplasm. And they have these tails, those little legs that you can see there, okay, and that makes the inner part of this membrane hydrophobic. That means water cannot penetrate through the cell membrane. Yep. Okay, there are pathways, okay, for different ions, for example, okay, to pass through the membrane, and also some of these pathways are for water. So every time you want to make water or some ions to enter or leave the cell, okay, those ions or water may do it using different proteins or transporters or channels, okay, that are in the membrane. Okay, those transporters or channels or pores in the membrane are made of proteins. Okay, they are the ones that we call integral proteins because they span the entire thickness of the membrane. And there are also proteins that are called peripheral because they are either in the outer part or in the inner part of the membrane, but they don't span the entire membrane. Cholesterol molecules are present to provide stability, okay, and the amount of cholesterol determines the fluidity or rigidity of the membrane. Okay, not only cholesterol, also those phospholipids, okay, can be made of different types of fatty acids. Okay, notice, for example, here we have two different types of fatty acids. Okay, one of them, the one that you see completely straight, is the type of fatty acid that we call saturated. Okay, they are very rigid. Okay, the one that you see here, okay, that has a different chemical structure, is more flexible, is the one that we call insaturated fatty acid. There are insaturated or polyunsaturated, and that explains, in part, the importance of diet for health, okay, because the proper balance between saturated and insaturated acids, fatty acids, and cholesterol in the membranes will make them more flexible or more rigid. Okay, and every cell needs to have certain flexibility, not too much, okay, but not too little, okay, so they can properly function. Now, there are also carbohydrates, okay, they can be, for example, forming compounds with proteins, in that case we call them glycoproteins, or with lipids, and in that case we call them glycolipids. And we are going to be seeing some of the functions of these glycoproteins and glycolipids. So as we said before, the cell membrane is a highly selectively permeable membrane, okay, or allows this enclosed and very well controlled chemical environment inside the cells. We need to make sure that the inner part of the cell is completely different from the environment. Okay, functions in cell-to-cell communication, recognition of other cells, and also generating and responding to signals from other cells.